My brother whispered to his friends, "This marriage is nothing but a business deal. She's not even half the woman Hannah used to be." They laughed loudly, slapping him on the back. My parents were close enough to hear everything, and they only smirked coldly. My dad added, "Just end it already." Gavin's grin widened like he had been waiting for that validation. "I'm Veronica Hayes." And that night changed everything. The party was meant to celebrate 5 years of Gavin and his wife Grayson's marriage. We'd rented a large house on the outskirts of Madison, Wisconsin. 50 guests, string lights glowing over the patio tables piled with artisanal cheeses that had transformed our old family dairy farm into a thriving business. Everyone was dressed to impress, glasses clinking, laughter everywhere, until that moment. I was near the outdoor bar refilling my glass when I heard Gavin lean in toward Kyle, Justin, and Derek, his closest college friends. His voice was low but carried anyway. "This whole thing is pure commerce," he said, swirling his wine like he owned the place. "Grayson's not even half the woman Hannah used to be." The words hit like a slap. Hannah, the college sweetheart everyone assumed he'd marry before Grayson came along. The guys laughed immediately, loud and approving. I froze mid-pour, glass in hand, and then saw my parents a few feet away. Dad Arthur didn't intervene. He simply wore that tight, cold smile he uses when someone finally speaks the truth. Mom Cheryl mirrored it, leaning close to Dad to whisper something. He nodded loud enough for everyone to hear. "Just end it already. No point dragging it out." Gavin's chest puffed with pride. Then I saw Grayson. She was walking across the patio carrying a wooden board filled with samples of her award-winning aged cheddar, the cheese that had won state recognition and brought contracts with high-end markets in Chicago and Minneapolis. Her posture was perfect, calm hair pinned neatly, wearing the navy dress she reserved for big events. She noticed. I saw it the moment her steps slowed. Her eyes flicked to the group, then my parents, then Gavin. She didn't flinch or drop the tray. She stopped, placed it carefully on the nearest table, and made a tiny, controlled gesture, tilted her head, raised an eyebrow, and gave the coldest, tiniest smile I've ever seen. No words. Just that look. The laughter died instantly. Gavin's face drained of color. Kyle averted his gaze. Justin suddenly became fascinated with his phone. Even Dad shifted and cleared his throat. The rest of the party continued in an awkward hush. People still ate and spoke, but the energy had vanished. Guests began leaving early, offering excuses about early mornings. By the time the caterers packed up, only family and the closest friends remained. Grayson excused herself first, citing a headache, and went upstairs. Gavin lingered downstairs, pouring another drink, pretending nothing had happened. I watched him, then followed her. I knew something significant was coming. 5 years of watching Grayson pour herself into our family business while Gavin coasted. 5 years of swallowing every slight and every insult, and now this. That look she gave him wasn't surprise. It was far more dangerous. And tonight, the secret he'd hidden for years was about to be exposed. If you believe that no one deserves to be betrayed by those closest to them, especially family, and that cutting ties can be the greatest strength you ever have, stay tuned and subscribe, hit the live button, and comment. The real story is just beginning, and what comes next will change everything. I knocked softly on the guest room door upstairs. Grayson opened it almost immediately, as if she'd been expecting someone. She stepped aside to let me in, then closed the door behind us with a quiet click. She didn't sit right away. Instead, she walked to the window overlooking the dark driveway where the last cars were pulling out. For a long moment, she just stared out, hands clasped behind her back. When she finally turned to face me, her expression was calm, too calm. "I've known for months," she said, voice steady. "What Gavin said tonight wasn't new. I've heard versions of it before." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and sat on the edge of the armchair near the bed. Grayson lowered herself onto the small sofa across from me. 5 years ago, when we got married, the family cheese operation was barely breaking even. The old dairy farm your parents handed down was producing basic blocks, sold mostly to local grocery stores. Your dad wanted to keep it small safe. Gavin talked big about expanding, but he never followed through. She paused, folding her hands in her lap. I saw potential no one else did. I started reading everything I could about artisanal cheese aging techniques, cultures pairings. I took weekend courses in Vermont, drove to competitions in California. I spent nights experimenting in the barn kitchen after full days working the books. I remembered those early months. Grayson would come back from trips with notebooks full of ideas, new equipment catalogs circled in red. She convinced a high-end restaurant in Milwaukee to try our first aged Gouda. One contract turned into 5, then 20. While I was doing that, she continued, Gavin was chasing one idea after another. First, it was opening a craft beer bar downtown, spent $50,000 on a lease, and build out before realizing he didn't have the licenses or experience. I covered the losses so your parents wouldn't find out. Then he bought secondhand packaging machines from a closed plant in Illinois, convinced they'd speed everything up. They broke down constantly, another $30,000 gone. I paid for repairs out of the business account. She looked straight at me. Last year, he launched an online subscription box, Wisconsin's finest curated cheeses. Spent months designing the website, hiring a photographer, promising investors big returns. Orders trickled in, but shipping costs ate everything. He lost another $40,000. Again, I quietly moved money around to keep the main operation afloat. I shifted in my seat. I'd known bits and pieces, late-night arguments I overheard Gavin brushing things off as learning curves. But hearing it laid out like this made it real. Every time one of his projects failed, he got quieter about it, Grayson said. Started spending more evenings out with Kyle and the guys, less time at the creamery. He'd show up for photos when reporters came, talk about our family legacy, but he hadn't touched a wheel of cheese in years. She leaned forward slightly. The more the business grew because of my work, the awards, the national distribution deals, the new production facility we built last spring, the more distant he became. Little comments started slipping out. That I was obsessed with work. That the company was getting too big for its own good. That I didn't appreciate how hard he'd tried. Her voice stayed even, but I could hear the weight behind it. I kept thinking, if I just worked harder, brought in more revenue, gave him bigger wins to share, he'd come around. I paid off the debts from his failures, gave him a generous salary he didn't earn, let him take credit in interviews. I thought it would be enough. She exhaled slowly, but tonight showed me it never would be. He resents that the success is mine, not his. And your parents? They've always seen me as the outsider who married and not the person who saved their family farm from going under. I felt heat rising in my chest. All those years I'd watched Grayson arrive first and leave last, tasting batches at dawn, negotiating contracts until midnight. I'd admired her drive, assumed Gavin was right there with her. Now I saw how much she'd carried alone. Grayson met my eyes. I'm done protecting his ego. And I'm done pretending everything's fine for the sake of family peace. The room felt smaller suddenly. I realized I was seeing my sister-in-law clearly for the first time, not just as Gavin's wife, but as the person who had built everything we all benefited from. A few weeks before the party, Grayson told me how it all started. She had come home early from the creamery one afternoon, something rare for her, and found Gavin's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. He was out in the barn, supposedly checking inventory. The screen lit up with a notification from a group chat she'd never seen before. Curiosity got the better of her. She picked it up and scrolled. The group was just the 4 of them, Gavin, Kyle, Justin, and Derek. The messages went back months. At first it was casual complaints about work, about how demanding the business had become. Then the tone shifted. Gavin wrote about keeping a log of every late night Grayson spent at the production facility. Proof she's neglecting the marriage, he called it. He shared screenshots of her calendar meetings with distributors scheduled after 6 p.m. and asked the others if it looked bad enough yet. Kyle replied with a thumbs up emoji and suggested taking photos when she looked tired after long days. Stress lines, messy hair makes her seem unstable, he wrote. Justin chimed in with ideas for twisting normal arguments into evidence of emotional volatility. Derek sent links to articles about high-asset divorces in Wisconsin, highlighting sections on dividing family businesses. The worst part was the financial planning. Gavin laid out numbers, current valuation of the cheese company, projected growth from the new aging caves Grayson had designed. He calculated what half would be worth then, more arguing that if he could prove she was the unstable one, a judge might award him a larger share plus alimony. She built it on family land, he typed. Courts love protecting legacy. Grayson stood there in the kitchen reading it all, heart-pounding but face blank. She put the phone back exactly as she'd found it before Gavin returned. That night, she started her own documentation, screenshots forwarded to a private email, notes on dates and times. When she finished telling me, the air in the room felt thick. I sat forward, stomach twisting. He's been planning this the whole time, using everything you've done against you. She nodded once. It's not just divorce. It's about taking credit for the company while painting me as the problem. Make me look unreliable. Walk away with as much as possible, start over with someone who doesn't threaten his ego. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. You don't have to handle this alone. Whatever you need. Records, witnesses, anything, I'm in. Grayson studied me for a long moment, like she was weighing whether to trust family after everything. Finally, she spoke. I've been gathering what I can on my own. Phone records, bank transfers covering his losses, emails where he admits not contributing. But the group chat is the smoking gun. I need solid copies, ones he can't claim I faked. I thought about Kyle. Over the years, he'd mentioned offhand that Rachel suspected he was hiding something, late-night secretive texts. She'd even asked me once if everything was okay with the guys' friendships. What about Rachel, I asked. If Kyle's part of this, she might know something. Or at least push him to come clean. Grayson's eyes sharpened. Worth finding out. If she's in the dark like I was, she deserves to know. And if Kyle's feeling any guilt, pressure from home might make him talk. We sat in silence after that, both processing how deep the betrayal went, not just from Gavin, but from the people closest to him. A few days after the party, my phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. He wanted to meet for coffee alone. No, Gavin. We picked a quiet spot downtown away from the usual crowd. When I arrived, he was already there, nursing a black coffee and staring into it like it held answers. He didn't waste time on small talk. Rachel found out, he said, voice low. She saw some messages on my phone a week ago. Confronted me that night. Said if I didn't fix this, tell the truth, she'd pack her bags. I stayed quiet, waiting. Kyle rubbed his face. I've been in that group chat since the beginning. Gavin started it as venting, but it turned into something else. He'd send updates on what he was collecting, photos, notes. Asked us for advice on how to make it look worse. I went along. Thought it was just talk, guys backing each other up. He pulled out his phone, opened a folder, and slid it across the table. I copied everything before he could delete it. Screenshots going back 6 months. Voice memos from a couple of the calls where he laid out timelines, who to talk to at the bank, how to phrase things to a lawyer. I scrolled through. Gavin's messages were methodical instructions on capturing Grayson at her most exhausted, suggestions for planting doubts with suppliers about her reliability. One thread even discussed valuing the aging caves separately to inflate his potential share. Kyle's hand shook slightly as he took the phone back. Rachel gave me an ultimatum. Said watching me help destroy someone who'd never done anything but build us all up, it changed how she saw me. I couldn't lose her over this. That same afternoon, Rachel reached out to Grayson directly. They met at a park near the creamery, no chance of running into anyone we knew. Rachel handed over a small drive. These are recordings I made, she told Grayson. After the third time, Kyle came home excited about Gavin's strategy. I started leaving my phone on record in his jacket pocket or on the nightstand. Caught hours of him repeating what they'd discussed: how to document spending, make normal business trips look like abandonment. Grayson listened without interrupting as Rachel played a clip. Kyle's voice clear and casual, Gavin bragging about a meeting with a divorce attorney who specialized in family businesses, outlining ways to challenge the prenup by claiming undue influence. But the real blow came halfway through another file. Gavin's voice laughing. "Once this is over, I can finally be with someone who gets me. Hannah's been texting nonstop since her divorce finalized. She's managing that boutique farm store 10 miles down the road. Now perfect cover for meeting up." Rachel stopped the recording there. He mentioned her name a few times after that. Dates at out-of-town hotels, excuses about supply runs. "I didn't know who Hannah was until Kyle explained, the girl Gavin almost married before you." Grayson's grip tightened on the drive, but her face stayed composed. The betrayal wasn't just financial anymore. It was personal in the worst way. The woman Gavin had held up as better, the one he'd thrown in her face at the party, it wasn't hypothetical. He was already stepping out. Rachel apologized for her husband's part, eyes wet. "I thought it was just stupid guy talk until I heard how calculated it was. No one deserves that." After Rachel left, Grayson sat on the park bench a long time, staring at the drive in her hand. When she finally spoke to me later that evening, her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. "This changes the stakes," she said. "It's not just about money or the company anymore. It's about making sure he walks away with nothing he can use to hurt anyone else." The hurt was there, deep, raw, but it fueled something stronger. Grayson wasn't breaking. She was sharpening. A month after the party, Grayson started moving forward quietly. She scheduled a meeting with her attorney, Victoria Lang, a specialist in high-asset divorces involving family businesses across Wisconsin. They met in Victoria's office, downtown, neutral ground, no risk of interruptions. Grayson arrived with a thick folder and the drive Rachel had given her. Victoria spread everything across the conference table, printed screenshots, transcribed recordings, bank statements showing transfers from business accounts to cover Gavin's personal failures. She listened to key audio clips without reaction, taking notes in precise handwriting. When Grayson finished laying it out, Victoria leaned back. "This is strong. The coordinated effort to manufacture instability crosses into potential fraud territory. But the real shield is your prenuptial agreement." Grayson nodded. "I insisted on it before the wedding. Gavin signed without reading closely, thought it was just standard paperwork. It clearly states that any contributions to the business remain separate property unless jointly developed." Victoria pulled the document from her files. "Wisconsin recognizes prenups as long as they're fair and voluntary. His attempts to undermine you actually strengthen enforcement. We can file to activate it immediately, limiting his claims to minimal personal assets." They spent the next hours mapping strategy, emergency filings to freeze joint accounts, notices to the small board protecting operational control. Victoria warned that Gavin might try to accelerate his own plans once served, but the evidence made any counterattack risky for him. That same week, Grayson reached out to Emily, our plant manager, who had been with the company since the early expansion days. Emily ran daily production, oversaw aging rooms, handled quality control, knew every detail of operations inside out. They met after hours at the creamery office. Grayson closed the door and explained the situation in broad terms without naming accusations yet. Emily's loyalty had always been clear. She'd turned down higher offers from bigger dairies because she believed in what Grayson built. "I need accurate records," Grayson said. "Everything showing day-to-day decisions, contracts signed, expansions funded." Emily didn't hesitate. She pulled historical ledgers from the server, spreadsheets tracking revenue growth, equipment purchases, supplier agreements. Each major milestone bore Grayson's signature or email approval. Gavin's name appeared rarely, mostly on minor expense reimbursements or ceremonial letters. One report stood out, a breakdown of labor hours logged in the facility management system. Grayson's badge scans showed consistent presence early mornings, tasting new batches weekends during peak seasons. Gavin's averaged less than 10 hours a month in recent years. Emily added payroll summaries proving Grayson's salary had been reinvested repeatedly into capital improvements while Gavin drew steady compensation regardless of performance. Anyone looking at this objectively sees who kept the wheels turning, she said quietly. Grayson thanked her, voice steady but eyes showing gratitude. Having someone inside the operation confirm the reality in black and white removed any lingering doubt about proceeding. With legal groundwork solid and financial proof undeniable, Grayson made her decision. She proposed a large family gathering at my parents' house, framed as an end-of-year company update. Invitations went out to Arthur and Cheryl Gavin, the small board of trusted advisors, even Kyle and a couple of longtime suppliers. On the surface, it was routine review, annual numbers discuss next season's projections. In reality, it would be the moment everything came into the open with witnesses present, who mattered most to the business legacy. Grayson chose the timing carefully, enough preparation to protect assets soon enough. Gavin couldn't preempt it. She didn't want a drawn-out court battle. She wanted clarity fast and final. I watched her finalize the guest list calm and focused. The woman who had carried the company alone for years was ready to claim full ownership of what she created. The night of the family meeting arrived. Everyone gathered in my parents' living room, Arthur and Cheryl at the head of the long oak table, Gavin across from them looking relaxed in a button-down shirt. Kyle and Rachel sat together on one side, Justin and Derek on the other. The small board members, 3 trusted advisors who'd worked with the creamery for decades, filled the remaining chairs. I took a spot near the back, heart pounding. Grayson entered last, carrying a laptop and a stack of folders. She sat up at the end of the table, plugged in the projector, and dimmed the lights slightly. "Thank you for coming," she said evenly. "Tonight we'll cover the company's year-end summary and some important family matters." She started with slides showing revenue figures up 15% from new distribution deals. Board members nodded approvingly. Then she clicked to a new section labeled Transparency Review. The first slide displayed printed screenshots from the group chat. Conversations about documenting late nights, staging photos of exhaustion. Gasps rippled through the room. Gavin shifted in his seat, color draining from his face. Grayson advanced to audio files. She played one short clip, Gavin's voice instructing on how to present evidence to a lawyer for maximum leverage. Kyle looked down at his hands. Rachel gripped his arm tightly. Next came hotel receipts and text exchanges with Hannah, bookings for weekend getaways, messages planning discreet meetups at her boutique store. The room went dead silent. Arthur's jaw tightened. Cheryl covered her mouth. Finally, Grayson projected the financial report Emily had prepared, clear breakdowns showing her direct contributions to every expansion, contrasted with Gavin's minimal involvement. Salaries paid out, losses covered personally. Gavin shot to his feet halfway through. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything." "I was joking around in those messages, guy talk, nothing serious." Grayson didn't flinch. She clicked to the next slide. More receipts, more transcripts. He turned red, pointing at her. "You've always been too ambitious, Grayson. Obsessed with growing the business bigger than it needed to be. I supported you, and this is how you repay me." "Dragging our family through this?" Arthur cleared his throat loudly. "Son, calm down. We all know you were just blowing off steam. Men talk like that sometimes doesn't mean anything." Grayson paused the presentation. "Arthur, take a closer look at these dates. The hotel stays happened during our busiest production season. He was gone while I handled everything alone." Arthur leaned forward, scanning the documents. His face changed as he read the messages about Hannah. He sat back slowly, expression blank. Cheryl's eyes filled with tears. She dabbed at them with a tissue, but said nothing. No defense for Grayson, no apology, just quiet sobs. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken accusations. Justin exchanged a glance with Derek. Without a word, they both stood and headed for the door. "We should go," Justin muttered. Derek nodded, avoiding everyone's eyes as they left. Gavin slumped back into his chair, staring at the projected slides like they burned him. The board members shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. Kyle finally spoke up. "I'm sorry. I should have stopped it sooner." Grayson closed the laptop with a soft click. The room stayed silent, the weight of everything settling over us like fog. The week after the meeting, things moved fast. Grayson filed the divorce papers on Monday morning. Victoria had everything ready motion, citing the prenup-attached evidence of attempted fraud requests for immediate asset protection. The judge in Dane County reviewed the packet that afternoon and granted an expedited hearing. We appeared in court 3 days later. Gavin showed up with a new attorney who looked overwhelmed from the start. Victoria presented the core documents in under 20 minutes, the prenuptial agreement, financial records proving separate contributions, proof of deception. Gavin's lawyer tried to argue emotional distress and shared family legacy, but the judge cut him off, citing the clear terms everyone had signed years earlier. By Friday, the decree was signed. Grayson retained full ownership of the cheese company production facility, aging caves, distribution contracts, the original farmland. She kept the house we'd lived in, investment accounts built from business profits, vehicles titled in her name. Gavin received his personal belongings, a modest cash settlement for items acquired before marriage, and the old truck he'd bought himself. The board convened an emergency session the following Monday. With the divorce final and evidence on record, they voted unanimously to remove Gavin from any management role. No severance, no consulting fees, just a clean break to protect the company's reputation with suppliers and retail partners. Kyle called me that weekend. His voice sounded steadier than I expected. I told Gavin I'm done. Blocked his number, told him not to contact Rachel or me again. He paused. "I apologized to Grayson in person yesterday. She didn't say much, just accepted it. I don't blame her." He added that Rachel had started therapy, working through how close she'd come to staying with someone capable of that level of betrayal. Kyle planned to join her sessions. They were focusing on rebuilding trust at home, away from old friendships. Justin and Derek vanished from the picture entirely. No texts, no shows at local events, no mentions in industry circles. Word spread quietly. People in Wisconsin's tight dairy community talk, and doors closed for anyone associated with the mess. My parents phoned a few times over the next days. Arthur's messages were short. "Family sticks together, Veronica. Time to forgive and move on." Cheryl left voicemails asking when I'd visit, saying blood is thicker than arguments. Neither mentioned apologizing to Grayson. Not once. They acted like the whole thing was a misunderstanding that could be swept aside if everyone just pretended hard enough. I let the calls go to voicemail more often than not. Gavin packed up quickly. He rented a small one-bedroom apartment 2 hours away in Appleton, cheaper rent, farther from familiar faces. The creamery job he'd held in title only was gone, and no other local producers wanted the liability of hiring him. He took a part-time shift at a big box store warehouse nights, mostly stocking shelves. Bills piled up fast without the company salary he'd relied on. Credit cards maxed from old ventures, truck payments he couldn't cover. Friends heard he'd started borrowing from online lenders high-interest loans to stay afloat. Grayson didn't gloat. She focused on operations, securing the new season's milk contracts, planning equipment upgrades. The company stayed stable, employees relieved by the clarity. I watched the fallout settle in layers. Gavin's choices had consequences that didn't vanish with excuses. The people who enabled him drifted away when it cost them something. My parents clung to their version of loyalty, but it rang hollow without accountability. Gavin's new life looked smaller every month. Fewer outings, canceled plans, quiet avoidance when old acquaintances crossed paths. 6 months later, the creamery looked different. Grayson broke ground on a second production facility just outside Milwaukee, state-of-the-art aging rooms, expanded packaging lines. She signed exclusive deals with 2 national upscale grocery chains, the kind that stock imported specialties next to our award-winning cheddars. Revenue climbed steadily enough to hire 20 new staff and upgrade the original farm's milking equipment. Local papers ran features on her. One headline called her Wisconsin's Queen of Artisanal Cheese. The reporter spent a day following her through the creamery, watching her taste test new batches, negotiate with buyers over video calls. Grayson answered questions directly, talked about innovation, sustainable sourcing, building a brand from family roots. She never mentioned the divorce by name, just said the company had entered a new chapter focused on growth. Employees thrived under the clarity, no more tension from divided leadership. Emily got promoted to operations director, overseeing both sites. The atmosphere shifted. People stayed late because they wanted to, not because drama hung in the air. I sold my apartment in Madison and moved into a place 10 minutes from Grayson's house. We started having dinner together most weeknights, cooking simple meals, talking through the day. She became the sister I'd always wanted, someone who listened without judgment, celebrated wins without envy. We planned expansions side by side, her handling production, me taking on marketing and events. Word about Gavin filtered back in pieces. He filed for bankruptcy, 4 months in credit card debt, unpaid rent collection notices. The part-time warehouse job didn't last. He quit after a few weeks, citing back issues. No one from the old circle reached out. Kyle and Rachel had moved an hour south for a fresh start. Suppliers who once dealt with him now routed everything through Grayson. He lived alone in that Appleton apartment, rarely leaving except for groceries. Mutual acquaintances ran into him occasionally, thinner, quieter, avoiding eye contact in store aisles. Hannah's name stopped coming up. Whatever they'd started fizzled once money tightened. My parents mentioned him in passing during rare calls. Arthur would say, "Your brother's going through a rough patch," like it was bad weather instead of self-inflicted. Cheryl sent birthday cards with short notes asking when the family would heal. They never visited Grayson, never acknowledged her role in saving their legacy. Excuses piled up: too busy, health appointments, weather too cold. I stopped making effort. Phone calls dwindled to holidays, texts unanswered. Blood ties didn't excuse years of favoritism or silence when truth came out. Grayson deserved better than forced politeness, and so did I. Looking back, the real family wasn't defined by last names or shared history. It was the people who chose loyalty when it mattered. Rachel speaking up, Emily standing firm, Grayson building something lasting despite everything thrown at her. Cutting toxic ties wasn't easy. It hurt at first, like losing part of my identity tied to childhood memories. But the space it created let real connections grow stronger. Protecting my peace and future meant walking away from relationships that only took. True family shows up, consistently supports, without keeping score, celebrates your success instead of resenting it. Anything less isn't worth holding on to. Grayson and I kept moving forward, new products, launching, awards lining the office shelves, plans for export trials next year. Life felt lighter, purposeful. Some bonds are earned, not inherited. And sometimes the strongest choice is knowing when to let go.